and welcome to the first edition of Dev Talks. My name is Irina, and I'm part of the events team of Contentful. And this is our full bar. Welcome. Really quick about Dev Talks. We want to inaugurate this event series who focuses on talks about developer tools and developer softwares and talks for developers. So it's something that we think is still lacking on the Berlin meetup scene. And we said that we're doing a lot of that. And for the first edition, we actually have with us Cristiano Betta, who came all the way from London last night just to give this talk. Cristiano is a very seasoned developer relations consultant and also a developer experience consultant. And today he's going to talk to us about developer experience. We're also live streaming this on YouTube for the first time, and let's hope everything turns out fine. Yeah. Cristiano?
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That works. Cool. Hi. Have you ever thought about how much first impressions matter? We all know they're like the cliches about kind of dating and interviewing. But that's not really what I want to talk about today, because that's not my expertise. What I want us to talk about today is kind of the first impression that products make on us, the products that we write, the products that we consume. This is my my Lego space shuttle from 1992. It's one of the 3 sets of space shuttles that exist. I've been thinking of buying the other ones, but the Technics Lego space shuttle goes for about 50K right now, and that's a little bit above my budget. It's really cool. It comes, unlike the actual space shuttle, with a trailer. Yeah. With one little car that goes in front, and some little motorcycles that go in ahead of it to signal that it's coming. It has a little satellite on the inside as well. The door's open. It's very cool. It doesn't have any NASA branding, I realized, because I think in Legoland we all go to space. Now, if you're not familiar with what Lego is, if you weren't bombarded with Lego like I was, you probably still know what Lego is, right? But if you don't, it's the brick building tool where you take one brick and then another, and then another, and then another, until eventually you've built something pretty damn complicated, something interesting. And you've done all of that without knowing anything about architectural design, mechanical engineering, without any kind of skills before that. Now, it was invented in 1932, but it didn't kind of shape into what it is now until somewhere in the 60s, 70s. But there's certain things like, you know, IKEA's Allen key, you know, the little key that you get with every IKEA set that means that you can't use a normal screwdriver. There's certain things like that within Lego that we can learn from, that we can integrate into our products, or that we can appreciate when we look at products that people have made for us. So my name is Cristiano. That's totally me with hair. I run a small consultancy, so I focus on developer experience. I try to help companies, large and small, to help them understand why their product isn't resonating with developers, why it isn't working, to help them understand where developers fall off as they're trying to integrate with them. And I like to write up for people, I like to write up just my analysis of products out there. So in the past, I've looked at Twilio, SendGrid, Pusher. I've got one of GitHub coming out soon. Where I looked at their APIs and I just started to look at kind of what does it look like for a developer to go from landing on their website to making that first integration. So who here works on a product that is kind of for other developers to use? There's a few Contentful people here. Cool. Who here works on a product that is for just any user to use? Okay, cool. Sorry, any user, not just developers. Cool. So today I'm going to take a similar look at what, you know, just like I like to look at Twilio and SendGrid, I'm going to take a look at what we can learn from Lego and how they onboard people into their process, and what we can learn from that. And along the road, we'll learn a little bit about human psychology, first impressions, and how all of these will kind of influence the developers, the users that use your product. There we go. Now the Lego experience starts with the box, right? It's very familiar, right? It's got the red logo. It's got the age range, number of pieces still in there, image of the product, complexity. But there's a lot of stuff here that is not that obvious. Lego has done a lot of stuff with this design to put us at ease with what their product is. Because it's often easy to forget that when you're a user of a product, you might not be as experienced as the master builders. And yes, that's a Lego term for the people that make these boxes and put them out there. So the box designers. We're not all master builders. We're not that familiar with necessarily how to assemble a space shuttle. We haven't experienced that product before. We haven't experienced necessarily assembling something from that industry. If you have an API, we might not be familiar with your industry at all. So not unlike the average age of a Lego builder, your end users are probably also a lot younger than you are, a lot less experienced, although probably they have a relatively high ratio of Lego experience. So Lego's job with these boxes is not just to sell you the product, although it does a pretty good job at it, but it's to overcome those deficiencies, the deficiencies of you not having the experience, and to put you at ease with the design. The boxes are there to inspire you what you can do with it. Quite often what you'll see some of the mechanics of what you can theoretically do with it. You'll see some building pieces, and especially on the Technics boxes, you'll see things like alternative things that you can build with it. And if you think about it, that's kind of core to the Lego product, right? But it's also core to most kind of developer products, most APIs. You don't just want people to make the things that you've designed for them to do. In the end, they're going to run their business, run their product, do whatever job they need to do using the product you've built for them. So the real thing with first impressions isn't just to look good, right? And I think, to be fair, this applies to job interviews as well. It's not to be the best person or have the best product or to look good. Rather, it's about making sure to the other person that you're dealing with that they'll be fine. Not that you're fine, that they'll be fine. So within a product, that means you need to motivate and inspire people. You need to motivate them that your product does something interesting, does something they want to use, something they want to discover. And you want to inspire them that that's going to make them a better person, and inspire them that they're going to be able to do that. Even if they've never used your product before or ever heard about your industry before. If you think about it, this is exactly some of the things that companies like Twilio do really well. Sending a text message. Who would have thought 10 years ago it would be really easy to send a text message? But now it is. And we can all do it without it knowing anything about the underlying stack. So in a technical product, there's a couple of ways we can approach this. Firstly, we need to motivate and inspire people, inspire developers. We need to tell them that the product they're going to use actually solves a problem. And I personally love what Pusher has done with this. So who here is familiar with Pusher? Cool, a lot of people aren't. Great. So Pusher makes it very simple. They have this landing page. They have a bit of a curl sample on the page, and you run the curl sample in your terminal, and then it changes the color on the website. Cool. And then you run it again, it changes the color again. Now, what they sell is a WebSockets kind of abstraction that makes it really easy for you to send any event to a laptop, a browser, or a watch, to any device really. But they're not talking about that here. They've explained to me what is interesting about this product without ever talking to me about WebSockets, APIs, or anything. No technical details. Take, for example, the opposite, which is Amazon, AWS. This is actually a kind of a spreadsheet that somebody made at an agency to explain what all the AWS services are in plain English. So EC2 is just Amazon Virtual Servers. I love the S3, which is Amazon Unlimited FTP Server, which is not exactly what it does, but it does help to explain what the product is. Because in the end, jargon has really big problems with it. Anybody get any idea what that was? Yeah. Is the answer bullshit?
It's something in a box.
Yeah, something in a box. So that's a video. It's kind of a gag that's been going on since like 1945. It's absolute nonsense. But just so you know, if you didn't get it, it's not your fault. It was absolutely nonsense. But it was a joke that was kind of written as it was submitted to a paper actually and accepted about how technical copy is so incredibly complicated sometimes that we can't understand what it's about. And in the end, we're all left feeling like idiots, right? We're all left feeling, I don't understand this, it must be me. So that brings me to the second point. It's important to give the developers the confidence that they're going to be able to do it, right? Not just the person who wrote the technology. And that's what actually makes Pusher really great is they don't talk about jargon. They don't talk about the APIs, the SDKs, etc. They just show you how to do it. I'd say the only problem they have is you still need to copy your curl command into a terminal. Who here runs a Windows machine? Cool. Well, those are the people without curl standard installed. I mean, they still need instructions on how to run curl. They could have just as well made a button that says, pretend like I've run this curl command and gotten the same visual effect without actually having curl installed. I love what Twilio does with this. So Twilio, if you're not familiar, voice, SMS, API. They have a bit of code here on the right, some Python. Any Python people in the room? Ah, 2. You can smell the H in the back there. Don't worry, I started off at Java. You have the code on the right here, and theoretically you could copy that, paste it into your editor and run it. But you can get the same effect by just putting your phone number in the box there and hit send. And within a few seconds you get some text on your phone that has actually that text in it, and you've achieved the same effect without actually having to run any code for a user. It's a good way to inspire people like this. So like I said, once you've reached those two goals of motivating, inspiring, that a product is interesting, you've hit confidence, right? You've given people the confidence that the product that you have is easy to use, and at that point, they're ready to get started. And Lego is great at getting people started. See, there's one thing in every box. Almost every box, unless it's like a box of 2 pieces. And it's the manual. Lego manual is the ultimate get started guide, right? It's included in almost every box, and it takes you all the way from 0 to Space Shuttle. And it helps you at every step along the way, brick by brick by brick. And it's amazing that all of this has been done on paper, without any text, right? And without any technical explanation of what you're doing. It's just tiny step by tiny step by tiny step. See, the human learning process is a bit of a loop. We learn new things, then we try things out. We look at what we did and how that reflects what we learned, so we reflect. And then we update our internal mental model of what we were expecting the output to be and what we what we got and kind of check back and see where we made a mistake. And then we repeat that process. And Lego has mastered this process in their manuals because they really start one brick at a time. You have a question?
It's okay to ask questions.
Let's leave it to the end. Why not? Cool. They take you brick by brick every little step without really explaining you necessarily what they're doing. Now, if you've assembled a few Lego kits, you'll see a couple of things that recur. So this bit here, there's a certain way in Lego to build a very solid structure, right? Is you take pieces and you kind of interlock them. So rather than kind of laying them straight on top of each other and then only overlapping a little bit, things have to overlap large parts to kind of create strong structures. Now, if you've assembled a few boxes, you'll learn that. And you'll see kids use that when they try to assemble something themselves without an instruction manual. Now, the great thing is that that's something that's used in architecture, mechanical engineering, yet Lego hasn't labeled it, they haven't explained it, they're not pointing back at it. They're just showing you every time how to do that. Yet the amount of get started guides where I've looked at where they go, by the way, authentication, it's OAuth 2 with an OpenID layer on top of it, it's pretty standard, you can figure it out, is insane, right? Why are we not explaining that? That stuff is complicated. Now, the reason why it's important we do that is because by not labeling it, by not resorting to jargon, and therefore we're not creating a divide between the people on the inside and on the outside, the people in the know-how and the people not in the know-how, the amateurs and the professionals. Everybody has a fair chance to learn how this product works. Now, I want to talk quickly about Apple, because no talk about design is complete unless you talk about Apple. I love Apple devices. I love kind of how they've mastered to make machines that are so forgiving and self-correcting and intuitive that you don't need a manual, right? You can just, an Apple MacBook doesn't come with a manual. An iPod barely comes with a manual these days. These products don't need manuals because they're Apple machines, but most products that we build, especially business products or APIs, they're not Apple products. Because when you take your product, especially if it's an API or an SDK, it's going to take very specific input, and then do something really powerful on the other end. And if you make a tiny little change to that, it will do something else really powerful on the other end. That's really cool. That's why technology is great. But it also means that it's easy to make mistakes there. So your product will be a lot less self-forgiving and self-correcting. Now, the way you get around that is like Lego's interlocking bricks, is you're just going to have to teach people at every stage about all the different things that they might not even have known that they needed to know. Or to take that away and abstract it away in another layer of your application. Now, I want to reiterate how important it is that Lego takes you all the way from kind of those first 3 bricks all the way to a final space shuttle, right? If Lego took you just those first few steps and then went, okay, here's the reference Lego, the reference space shuttle, you can figure it out, the majority of us would not complete it. We'd have a lot less love for Lego. We'd feel very upset, and we'd probably not buy another box again. Yet the amount of companies that have a get started button on the middle of their website that takes you just through sign up and then leaves you there is just silly. That shows that these companies aren't necessarily interested in helping you build something. They're interested in harvesting your email address so they can then email you to ask you why you haven't built something. Now, I show Pusher here, but Pusher has actually done a really good job here. So when you get started, yes, they sign you up, but then the first thing they do when you sign up is they'll show you a very nice form, and they say, okay, you need to create your first application, something we need to do. They already fill in a name for you, because why would you have to fill in a name the first time? It's probably going to be a test app anyway. And then they ask you what technology you use. Their product kind of has a back end and a front end element to it. So they ask you what technology you want to use. You select those, and then once you've created your app, they just give you code. You could copy this HTML, load it on your web server, run that curl command, and you'll see something similar happen as what you saw happen with their demo. Except now you've run it with your API keys in place. That's really cool, right? Because in the end, every step matters, right? It's not just whether or not we take just the first step where we start off with the first kind of implementation. In the end, we have to take people, or as users, we need to be taken all the way from that first step, the first 10 seconds, to the next, to getting motivated, to getting inspired, to getting started, to creating that first application, to making that first API call, to eventually, after many steps, create that space shuttle. My presenter notes have just gone yellow. Let's change the topic for a bit. Who here has kids? Cool. Do they have Lego? Yeah. Who here has younger siblings? So I think a lot of us will have seen other people play with Lego, right? Have you ever noticed how people find the next piece they need? Right? It's not like a computer would just try every piece and go, is this the piece I need? Is this the piece I need? But that's not how humans work. Humans just look at the whole bag of Lego and go, which one is approximately the size and shape of what I need? And kind of zoom in, and if they're pretty sure, they grab it, and then if they're really sure, they put it on the model, and then they continue on and compare it to the image in the manual to see if it looks the same. Now that process, well, the next step is if it doesn't fit, they will just throw it out and find the next one. That process is called satisficing. And we do it all. We do it every day. We do it on websites where you land on a website, you're trying to find something. What do? You just click on the first link and see that you think is right, because there's no danger in clicking a link. So you click on it and go, is that what I want to know? Oh, back, search further on the page, next link, and you click around. But it's also the same thing that firefighters do when they come to a fire. Firefighters don't come to a fire and make a 5-point presentation about what their approach is exactly and how they're going to do it and who's responsible for what. Because in the meantime, there's a fire, right? Instead, they go in, take it step by step, evaluate, and if something doesn't seem to be the right thing, they backtrack and go and try something else. Now, Lego has some of these things in there as well. So they realize that people have this behavior, but occasionally there's certain mistakes that happen often, right? So what they've done is to add a little bit of kind of support for those moments where it often goes wrong. So this thing here, that is for you to use. Clearly in this set, there's multiple ones of these pieces, but from various different lengths. So that's a one-on-one sample. So you can grab a piece, put it on the piece of paper, and look, is this the right size before you start assembling it? You just hold it on top of there. That helps people prevents people from making mistakes at the right time. Now, when it comes to user products, whether or not it's APIs or SDKs or just anything for any user, our common way is quite often to, if something happens often, we'll put up a big warning in the documentation saying, people keep doing this, you should stop doing that, in big red letters or white letters on the red background. I think that works really well, right? Like just a big warning to tell them they're doing something wrong and why are all these people doing this wrong. See, here's the thing. nobody reads that, right? Instead, it's a lot better to make your product more forgiving. Twilio does a great job at this. If you make an API call to their API and you're forgetting a parameter, what it does is it will tell you, hey, you've forgotten this parameter. But additionally, they have in the API response, they have a link to the documentation. So you can just go and open up a link to the documentation. You're helping a developer actually make your product better and easier to use. Because like I said, people don't read. The average person, like I said, takes less time than it takes for us to blink sometimes to decide a whole bunch of different things about your website. What it is, what it does, where they are on the website, where they are within your entire kind of sitemap of your website, where they can go, where they came from, all those kind of things in a fraction of a second. And as much as you might think, or somebody in your company might think that they are the artisanal crafter of like the most best copy ever, the best text they could ever write, in the end, people are just not going to read it. And that's a sad fact. Instead, they're just going to use your product for what they think your product is for. Just like they visit a website, they're going to use it, try it, see what it is for. And if it's not what it is for, they'll just track back and see what else they can build on it or give up on it. Because it's interesting to think like your product is something very specific, right? It's that car. That's what we're building. Yet, in the end, when somebody uses your product, they probably have something else in mind. What is this? Doors. What kind of doors? Car doors. Car doors. They're probably some of the most specific Lego pieces out there, right? Car doors. They kind of swivel around. They even like very nicely kind of swivel against the little knobs so that they stop and don't flip inwards. Yeah, I've seen them used as, wings of a small plane, ears of a bunny, a speed bump. You can use them in so many different ways, and especially in the really absurd kits, they're used in very creative ways. And if you think about that, that's the same applies to your product. You don't want people to build the samples you've written them, right? You want them to build products on top of your product. Now, Lego's realized that this is true. I mean, my space shuttle spent about 18 years in a box in pieces because about 18 years ago, I decided to take it apart and build something new. And then I went to uni and I kind of got distracted, right? And I literally only put it back together in December. I was missing one piece, which I had to order very expensively off of eBay. But Lego's realized this, right? This is the, I need to read this out, sorry. This is the Lego.com digital designer virtual building software. It's quite a mouthful. It's basically AutoCAD for Lego. You can bring in pieces and just build something, so you don't have to actually own like a couple of $1,000 of Lego. You can just bring in any piece and build something. And when you build something, you can then share it on ideas.lego.com. And then if you get 10,000 votes, they'll actually consider it as a kit that they will release in stores. And in the manual will be your face, because you'll be at that point a master builder. Your name and your face will be in there credited. That's really awesome. I really want to build a Lego kit now, but I'm not that good. Now, if we compare that to like how some of the products that we use operate, very different story. I recently got an Amazon Echo. Now, Amazon, we already talked about them before. Their developer experience around the Echo is pretty horrific. But it gets worse when we're looking at kind of their submission process. So I was writing a skill to ask whether or not GitHub is having any issues. So I can, rather than going to github.com or status.github.com, I could just ask my Alexa, like, is it having issues? When you submit a skill, you have to like give it lots of samples and other stuff and like 4 or 5 pages of virtual paperwork, and then you submit it. And then some guy in somewhere else with a different accent than mine clearly tried out the skill and couldn't pronounce GitHub. Or the Alexa, at least, isn't very good at picking up the word GitHub. It's very good at Twitter and DigitalOcean, but not at GitHub. So I got rejected, and then I tweaked it, submitted it, it got rejected, and then tweaked it. And eventually I got it submitted. And I just got an email saying, okay, it's been accepted now. That's disappointing, right? That's really disappointing at that point, where it's like, is that all the celebration we're gonna have? Because you have to think, if somebody built something on top of your platform, if they've gone through all those steps, all that effort that we've put in, right, to make sure that they're motivated, inspired, and then we get them through the Get Started guide, and then they actually eventually build something and launch it, then we have to celebrate that, right? The same way that we celebrated in Lego with, putting your name in the manual to celebrate that you were the one who came up with this. Because in the end, we want the experience not to be that of learn, build, reject, right? We want that to be of learn, build, share, right? Learn something, build something, and then share that with the community. This is just intermission. Are you still awake? Good. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up. There's a couple of things I want you to take away from this talk, and the first one is to expect difference, right? Not just difference in culture and the way we look and where we come from, but culture in our experience, our life experience, our technical experience, where we are in our experience from being kind of a novice developer to being kind of some guru in whatever language we want to become a guru in. When you build a product, you have to accommodate for that. You have to accommodate for everybody along that spectrum, because otherwise you're building a product that can only be used by professionals and not by amateurs, or only by enterprises but not by startups, or even worse, only by the overrepresented but not by the underrepresented. And when developers start building, every 10 seconds matters, right? Even the first 10, and then the next 10, the next 10, because the next 10 influences the one after that, which influences the one after that. And if you don't allow somebody to succeed with your product, if you don't support them in every step, and if the product doesn't self-correct and support people and guide them, then the next 10 seconds, they're just gonna look at somebody else's product, right? Which is not what you want. So the final one is when a developer actually then succeeds on your platform, when they've put in all of that effort to go all the way from zero, all the way to that space shuttle, to get motivated and inspired, to take all of those steps of investing into your product that you think is amazing, but they knew nothing about when they started, then you have to celebrate that success. You have to celebrate that as yours, right? The way for all of us to succeed is to help the people that we built the products for to succeed as well. If we can do that, our products will be successful. So I'm going to leave you with a wise quote that I completely made up, which is that you can write the best copy in the world, right? You can have the best instruction videos ever made. You can have the best developed product ever. But when somebody steps on a piece of Lego, it still hurts. So thank you very much. I'm open for questions.
Can I ask you for one favor?
Yes.
Can you please repeat the question in the microphone so that the people on YouTube can also interact with us?
Cool.
Okay. Thank you.
Do we have any questions from YouTube?
Not so far.
Not so far.
Well, the live chat is on, so people know that.
You have a question there in the middle, or has it been answered?
Well, I have a different one.
You have a different one now.
I just, since you spent a lot of time thinking about Lego and architecture and development at the same time, what would you say are the analogies between building a Lego architecture and thinking about it in code ways? Because it would be easier to visualize if I can visualize a Lego building instead of the code actually.
Okay, so the question is, how can you kind of find an analogy between what it takes to build a Lego kit from a building point perspective and kind of writing code. So one of the things I like to do with clients is to look at their building blocks and then look at how that is implemented in their SDKs. So for example, if you're a company that does encryption, right, encrypted communication, then your steps might look like initialize the SDK, right, encrypt a message, sign a message, and then on the other side, it's decrypt the message and verify the message. Encryption. Now, those are the building blocks. But then if you compare that with the steps that would take in an SDK or in an API to do, if each of these building blocks takes me 3 API calls, then there is a disconnect between those building blocks and the product. And at that point, you can start looking at your product from an engineering point of view. It's like, okay, how can we wrap those conceptual building blocks into actual blocks that people can use that are one API call, one SDK call, rather than the 3 that they are now. Because in the end, that's how Lego approaches that in their manuals as well. When they have something a bit more complicated, they'll often go on the site, collect these little pieces into a product, into a sub-product that then gets kind of plugged into the bigger product. So if you start looking at your product like that, you can build abstraction layers on top of what you have to better fit the mental model of what they're actually trying to solve, which is those kind of steps and not necessarily the technical way in which under the hood you've implemented it, which is probably correct, but not the easiest way to use it. That's the best analogy I have for that. Anything else? People want more pizza or beer? No.
There's a significant difference between doing developer experience for customers as opposed to within your own organization.
So the question is whether or not there's a significant difference between doing developer experience for kind of internal and external kind of products, APIs, etc. I mean, yeah, there's definitely differences. Like I said, a lot of it comes down to motivation and inspiration. Quite often people inside of companies have the motivation because they're being financially or by kind of by managers, they're being already told you have to use this. This is what needs to be used. I've noticed in bigger companies, it's quite often more an issue of discovery, where it's a big company, they have lots of APIs developed in different teams, but they might not all know that these APIs exist. So kind of facilitating discovery of what these APIs can do and how they come in, and how for those people to get started with them in a way that isn't obstructive to the existing company, because quite often internally there isn't necessarily a sandbox to play with. It's against the live environment, and that can cause issues. But the majority of the people I work with are kind of external APIs. Oh, one over there.
I don't know if somebody defined developer experience as every interaction the developer has with the company or your product. So beyond the onboarding, what do you think is the most common mistake companies, especially companies that are that focused, make with regards to how they communicate or approach developers?
So the question is, some people kind of interpret developer experience as a bit more broader beyond just the onboarding into every bit of the interaction that your company has with developers. Personally, I'd say that's developer relations, but people, terminology differs. And then the question was, what is the worst thing I've seen people kind of mess up in that space? I'd say it's the last bit I said there, which is to celebrate success and to support people as they grow. When somebody, especially when you're a young company and you're hip and cool, the people who are growing with you are on the same journey as you. They're growing together with you. They're becoming bigger companies as well. You see this in the US a lot, where like Stripe and Uber, like those things kind of went hand in hand initially, where they kind of came along, and for them to support each other is very important. So to celebrate the success and to build valuable relationships with those new customers, even if they're small like you when they start, but then growing with you. That's a really tough thing to do that I have seen companies kind of completely miss out on, but not realizing that, you know, what's now a small client is going to be a big client down the line. Okay, any more questions? No. One.
Yeah.
Every time we're almost at that.
How can you collect errors? I mean, you know, with API, we have like services that you can use to track exceptions.
Yes.
Let's say that you build like one Lego that nobody can build, can develop. How can you track if something like it doesn't go as you like?
How can you build? So I think the question is, how can you kind of detect user error in your product?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like the Lego system, can you collect feedback or?
I think, yeah, I mean, Lego kits are extensively tested, right? Even when those ideas that Lego.com projects, even when they reach 10,000 points, they'll have somebody from Lego kind of redo it the way they would do it, because quite often there are certain cost constraints, like a box needs to be under a certain amount of pounds or euros. It needs to have a certain amount of pieces, not that it needs to be structurally sound, etc. So they do a lot of stuff around there. User research. I mean, in the end, the answer is just user research there. Put it in front of people and test where the errors are. For an API, the solution really is to, you know, just keep an eye on your Twitter, your forums, whatever, and see what the common mistakes are, and actually measure where the problems are, right? Which API calls are getting the most kind of confusion, problems, etc. If it's all label and categorize them, if they're all around your initialization and installation, then your installation or initialization needs to be improved. If it's more about kind of this one feature on the side that people aren't understanding, then that's what you should be looking at. But yeah, I don't quite have a Lego analogy there now. At some point, it becomes a leaky analogy, kind of a leaky abstraction, and it just falls apart. Okay. One. Yeah. Have I ever stepped on a Lego? Yes, recently. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cristiano. That was delightful, as always. I think it's the third time I actually see this talk.
Third time?
Yeah, I think so, for me. I'm a big fan.
Is it getting better?
Always.
Always.
We are now gonna have some more pizza, some more wraps, some more drinks. Just feel free to hang around and talk to the people you're sitting next to. And see you next time, probably in 1 month. Okay.